Hi there, welcome to the Rock and Goal podcast, where sport and music come together like some messy magic set to the sound of the Stones.
Find out what rocks your favourite sports stars and how the big names in music roll when it comes to their sporting passions. I'm John Anderson, 35 years as a sports commentator, even longer as a gig goer and avid record buyer.
And I'm Chris Skudder. You might know me from talking sport on Sky News since the days that grunge became a thing way back in the early 90s. And I've been going to gigs since the 1970s.
And here's the thing, we both love talking about music just as much as we do about sport. And so do our guests.
Can you get us a table tonight for 5 at Lucio's? I said, it's going to be full, Nick, you know, it's a bit late. I said, it better be for somebody special for me calling Lucio. He said, how about Bruce Springsteen? I went, what? I said, can I come?
Yes, our rock and goaler in this episode was a footballing great, boy wonder at age 16 and the first ever £1 million player when he moved from Birmingham to Brian Clough's Nottingham Forest, the original Superboy, Trevor Francis.
But what you might not know is that as well as playing with and against some of the greatest names in football, he's also rubbed shoulders with some of music's A-list superstars.
Welcome, Trevor. it is a real privilege. And
thank you.
The book, it's on the table here, which is One in a Million, which we all, of course, recognise as the first £1 million footballer. We haven't got a camera here, but I'm holding a football programme. Funny enough, it's Birmingham Watford, John, you're saying, from March 1971. And there's a picture on the front that Trevor will just show you. The programme is blue and it's got the old football rattles. And in the middle of the rattle is a picture of a certain teenage, Trevor Francis, age 16. I think that is the Bolton game when you scored 4 goals. Your hands are up in the air and the crowd all going nuts behind you. Can you remember any of that?
I can remember quite a bit of it, yeah. I mean, I still live in the area. We're in Solihull doing this interview, and every time I step out of my home, you know, I'm stopped by Blues supporters, as you saw today, as you witnessed, wanting to reminisce about those days. And they were great days. I have to admit that...
There you go, look, I'm holding it up, a rattle. It's just to prove you I've got the programme. There's the programme from the match after, and the headline is 1, 2, 3, 4, it's Francis.
What I would say about that is that obviously I remember scoring 4. I remember being brought off with an injury about 7 or 8 minutes to go, and the guy who went on as a substitute for me was Keith Bowker, and you know, after the game, the first thing I asked was, did he get any chances? And he had a couple of chances that I think, well, if I had been on that pitch, maybe I'd have got more than 4. That's not me being greedy. Yeah. If you were to ask me now, describe each goal, I wouldn't be able to.
You wouldn't be able to?
No, but...
no. I can remember all of them. The 4 goals you got that day, there's a picture here of you sort of lobbing the goalie for one. One was a rebound, one was a header. That was the 4th one. I was right behind the goal, so I saw them all, you know, and we were all going, you know, you can imagine what it was like. I was 10 or something. Because you played at Cardiff, didn't you? You made your debut, and I've got a couple of pictures here which we showed you earlier, and when you looked so fresh-faced and you came on. But your proper debut was against Oxford.
But the Cardiff game I was a half-time substitute when there was only one substitute allowed. That was for the late Johnny Vincent. I came on, hit the post, but we lost the game to 2 goals from John Toshak at Cardiff. But just a word about those days. They were incredible days, and you can imagine the confidence that I was playing with, because literally as a 16-year-old, it didn't matter if I made mistakes. You know, rather than just dropping the ball off easy to a colleague, I used to try and attempt to beat 3-4 players, you know, and then actually succeeded in doing it on a regular basis and then sticking it in the back of the net. Yeah. So they were incredible days, and, you know, days that will never ever be repeated. It was just magical days. Yeah.
Here's the programme. Oxford United, 12th of September 70. That was your full debut. There's some programme notes from Freddie Goodwin inside. And bizarrely, I was just reading that this morning. It's talking about goal line technology. It's talking about players being, you know, goals being disallowed. And he says, you know, one day goal line technology will come, which is funny enough. That's nearly 50 years ago.
But if you were to look at the actual lineup of the 2 teams, in the Oxford team are the Atkinson brothers.
Yes.
Graham sadly died Ron's still with us, 80 years of age now.
There's a picture from the Nottingham Forest programme, October 70. A picture of you jumping. That's on your debut, and I'm pretty sure that guy behind you in the yellow shirt is Ron Atkinson. See it?
Yeah. Well, Ron tells everyone that he had me in his pocket that day. He said I only gave him one kick. He said, mind you, that was the goal.
Yeah.
You talked about your confidence. I mean, the 16-year-old boy in those days. I mean, nowadays we're fairly accustomed to teenage players, Kylian Mbappe probably being the latest example, and they're schooled and they're brought up and there are academies. I doubt it was like that. You were a boy from Plymouth. You come into Birmingham, you have instant success. You talked about your confidence as a striker. What about as a person? I'm sort of interested to know what it was like socially for you in that environment. Obviously you became a massive name overnight.
You've got to remember, I was receiving not just back page headlines, but front page headlines in them days. I had to be careful what I did because I was instantly recognised. There was one occasion where I was in a pub in Birmingham City Centre, and straight away the word went around that I was in there, and I was surrounded by Aston Villa supporters, and it was a little uncomfortable.
Yeah. Can't have been in Birmingham then.
No, and I had a pint of beer thrown in my face. So quickly I was escorted out the back door. And really that was the end of my days going into a pub, because whilst the other apprentices, who weren't recognised could get away with it, I had to live a different type of life. So my upbringing was slightly different in the early days as a teenager.
Yeah, I remember the injury when you got picked for England first time, and the day after you did your Achilles, didn't you? That was a real shame because you were how old were you then?
That actually wasn't my Achilles. That was the
Sheffield United, wasn't it?
Yes, it was the tendon behind my knee.
But how old were you? 18 or were you a bit older then?
1974 that was. So I was 20 years of age.
Yeah, that should have been New England. Yeah, because everyone thought this guy definitely should be playing for England.
Well, I was
in those days they didn't pick 20-year-olds, did they? But
no, but it was often said that Fleet Street, had a great influence on the selection of any England squad and any England team, and it was widely tipped that I was going to make my debut on the Wednesday night. The manager at the time was Don Revie, but I sustained this bad injury at Sheffield United, which was career threatening. I was out for some 5 or 6 months. Made a recovery, but it took me 3 years to actually win my first England cap. Yeah. My form came back, after 6, 7, 8 months, but there were that many options for the England manager in them days. It's not like today, where you got, okay, I'm actually talking at this moment when it's quite a good moment, for English football in terms of, the players that Gareth Southgate's got at his disposal. We've got some, good forwards. But in them days, there were as many as 15 or 16 strikers that Don Revie could have selected. Yeah. So that's how difficult it was to actually get into the England team.
Yeah, I was at your first game, Holland, wasn't it, at Wembley? Yeah. February 77. We lost 2-0.
At the end of that game at Wembley against Holland, I had a little tap on my shoulder, and it was from the great man himself, Johan Cruyff, and I had the opportunity of swapping shirts. And I'd waited, I thought it was a long time. Talked about, I was 23 years of age. And I had to say to him, I'm sorry, but I can't swap it, because what was in my mind...
You want to keep your first shirt?
Well, not so much that I wanted to keep my first shirt. It was the fact that could be my first and only shirt for England. Yeah. I may never, ever win another England shirt. Yeah. So that's the reason why I didn't do it.
How many caps did you get in the end? Was it
52?
52. Should have been many, many more. It's... Anybody you speak to, I mean, Sir Alf Ramsey said, didn't he, that in when he was a manager here, that you were the best player in the country, and it was always seemed to be something just happened. You got that injury or whatever.
Well, I'm going to say something. I'm going to say something now that you're not going to particularly relish me saying, but I think that it would have helped. I talked about my injuries that curtailed my England career, but it certainly would have helped if I had been playing for one of the big teams during my early part of my career. That's taken nothing away from Birmingham, because I'll always be indebted to Birmingham for giving me my opportunity. I was here for 9 years, but most of those 9 years, it was a bit of a struggle. Yeah. So, I mean, I noticed the difference when I went to Nottingham Forest, playing with the quality of player that I was playing with. And especially...
But they were the league champions. I mean, they were champions at the time.
They were,
they?
but it makes such a difference, Chris. It's like, I talk about my days in Italy when, defences were always on top. But when you've got players of the calibre that I had, we're only allowed to have 2 foreigners. I played for 2 years with Liam Brady and then 2 years with Graham Souness. And they could see a pass. But it's one thing seeing a pass and actually executing it.
Yeah.
And when you're playing with players like that, it makes such a difference.
You made your name though, Trevor. Now, we're going to come on to the music side of things in a minute. And Jeff Lynne, the great Jeff Lynne, who's now 70 plus, and a great friend of yours. Yeah. And he used to sit at the stands. I mean, there's a few, celebrity music blues fans. And he used to shout, "Give it to the kid." Yeah. Now, I remember that. I was obviously younger, but the whole thing with you was when you exploded and started scoring all those goals, it was when you got the ball, your first instinct was, "Where's the goal? I'm going to dribble it all the way." I've got a program here which illustrates that. I don't know if you remember this goal, but it's one of the sort of many. I know you've told me before, but you couldn't, when you were 16, a lot of them were sort of a bit blurry. The Bolt goals were not the most spectacular you scored. But trust me, you scored some brilliant ones. Carlisle was one. I know some blues fans will listen to this and remember that.
Carlisle and
my dad was driving me home going, "I've never seen anything like it." And we were sort of, he's 16. And this is when against Millwall here, and I'll read it to you. It says, included a gem of a goal from Trevor Francis. But he basically picked the ball up at the halfway line, beat half the team, beat 2 more players and knocked it in the corner. And there's a great picture of you just sort of looking very svelte and very quick. And celebrating at the goal with Phil Summerhill and Alan Campbell. Do you remember that? Cause I remember it was at least the halfway line. You beat half the team, I remember it.
I do remember them, and I touched on it this now. I scored goals that I wasn't entitled to score, but...
You didn't pass, that was it. I mean,
I never...
Some people thought it was coached out of you.
No,
was it coached out of you or not?
No. I think as you get older, you start to have a greater appreciation of what's expected and what's needed in a team. So, I could beat 2 players and drop it off. I mean, those were special moments because you relate to those goals. But there were probably numerous other occasions when I tried to beat players and lost possession, and I put the team in difficulty. Probably the team hit us on the counter attack, but it didn't matter because.
But that's how
because he's only the kid.
Yeah.
But you know
people
what the sad thing
to do.
The sad thing is for me, Chris, is that I've got grandchildren now, and they're hearing about what their granddad used to do. And there's no way of actually showing them.
Well, it's a real tragedy. That first season wasn't filmed because, as I've just pointed out, you scored some worldies that season, and you were 16 years old, which is why everyone got excited. And then the following season, I think you scored less. But I tell you what, Bob Latchford and Bob Hatton, who are your strike partners, were the top 2 scorers in that division in the promotion team, and you scored about 10 or 12, didn't you, as well?
Yeah.
And you made goals for them.
And within a short space of time, the crowds had gone from like 15,000 at St Andrews up to 50,000.
50, yeah, they were. It was incredible. It was a circus. We loved it.
1972, when we got promotion, I think there was something like 7 or 8 occasions when we actually attracted a home crowd at St Andrews of in excess of 40,000.
Yeah, that was amazing.
There was a replay in the cup against Huddersfield, FA Cup.
We got to the semi-final,
and that was 52,000.
Yeah, I was there.
It was people locked out.
Yeah. It was the same in the late 60s as well with cup runs, but the 72 season was when we got to the semi-final, and you mentioned Don Revie, and of course, I remember you. I mean, I was 12. So I remember crying, and it was just, there were twice as many Blues fans as Leeds, and they were there with their, you remember this, John?
Do you know, Chris,
the tags, remember the tags there?
The tie-ups, with the number on it.
Alan Clark and all that.
I'm often asked, what's the best club team you've ever played against? And I think back to some of them Liverpool teams, they were a bit special. Yeah. In 1982, Juventus were, Juventus had the likes of Zoff, Gentile, Tardelli, Cabrini, Paolo Rossi, Boniek, Platini, and they were an incredible team. But my response is that 72 team, Leeds United, they didn't win as much as what they should have done. No. But for me, and I often think, well, because I was so young then, I was just 18 years of age, was I really impressionable?
They were a great side.
They were a great team. They were a great team.
Yeah, they were.
They beat us 3-0 in
Giles,
the
Laurie
semi-final.
McGray,
Alan
Clark. Mick Jones, I think.
You probably remember that.
I could name the 11.
Yeah.
Jack Charles.
Would you probably remember?
You named the '66 World Cup team. I could do the same with Leeds.
I can as well. I remember that day because they wore yellow, didn't they, with their silly sock tags and all that, and they were so intimidating. And we wore the penguin strip, but the red and white. Do you remember that day? It was a red and white. I don't know why we wore red and white, but we did, and lost. Were well beaten by.
Do you know
I
was with Malcolm Page on Saturday, and a former Birmingham City player and a very, very good former player. And we were talking about the build-up to that Leeds game because we went to, in training camp down in Malvern.
Yeah.
And we practiced down there. And each day we practice a warm-up routine to try and copy what Leeds were doing. Do you remember it?
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah,
they did it around the centre circle.
Yeah, it was like a dance or something, wasn't it? Was it?
Yeah, and we did something.
Yeah, I remember it, and the crowd were going mad. Yeah,
we did something similar, and it got to the point where, as players, we thought, this seems to be more important than what the game's going to be. Getting this, warm-up routine right.
Leeds are the first team I can ever remember with that ole when they were passing the ball. Do you remember that game? They played was it Southampton? They beat them 7-0 or something. It was on Match of the Day, and I remember as a kid going, this is incredible stuff. We hadn't seen that in English
football. Go on, I'll quickly
before.
name the team. Sprake or Harvey in goal.
Yeah.
Reaney, right back.
Reaney, Charlton, Hunter, Cooper, Lorimer, Bremner, Giles, Gray, Clark and Jones.
Yes. Yeah.
Sub Paul Madeley.
Paul Madeley, who went on to have a chain of DIY shops in South Wales, I remember, because I was working down there.
Very, very versatile.
He's dead now, isn't he, Paul?
Yeah, he died, yes.
Very, very good player.
He was Mr. Versatile, wasn't he? Played in every position. You know what you were saying about you wish you could look back on your exploits, because nowadays you just pick up a phone and you can watch whatever you like. There is a feature in one of these programs that Chris has brought where you're presented with a little cine film.
Yeah,
have you still got that? And are you ever going to give that the light of day?
It will be somewhere, but I'm
presented by Freddie Goodwin after your debut.
I'm not one for storing things.
Right.
If you said to me, "Show me my England caps and my medals," I would probably be able to find them. Yeah. But if you were to walk in my home, you probably wouldn't. If you didn't know me, you wouldn't have known that I was a footballer.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't have been on that programme through the keyhole. Do you remember that when they had to guess?
Well, I might have been on it, but they wouldn't have guessed me.
on that subject,
they probably thought you were a plumber or something.
On that subject, I'm looking at the picture of Freddie Goodwin giving you that cine reel, which was after your debut. Just looking at the picture, you say more than a footballer. You look like a pop star, Trevor. I've got to say here with the hair. You look as though you should be in what band, John?
I tell you, who he looks like. He looks like Mike Nesmith out of the Monkees.
The Monkees,
the one with the bobble hat, but he hasn't got the bobble hat on. But the hair is very similar.
So,
can I just mention Freddie, because he was a huge influence on my career, and he went to live in America. And when I was playing at QPR, I was player manager. It's the first time I'd seen Freddie for many, many years. He turned up at Villa Park because it was QPR against Aston Villa in the days when Graham Taylor was the manager. And Aston Villa were riding very, very high. They were second in the league against the QPR team that on the day were given magnificent away support. We had more supporters than what we normally do. That was because Birmingham City's game had been postponed, and all the Blues supporters came to support me. And we went, so I got Freddie tickets, box tickets to watch me play. This would be around 87.
Yeah.
David Platt put Aston Villa in the lead, and then I scored a hat trick. and with 10 minutes to go, I substituted myself, and I can remember there was probably 30,000 in Villa Park all booing me as I shook hands with the referee and walked off the pitch.
Except for the Blues fans who were cheering.
Everyone remembers that day because I scored a hat trick.
Let's just go back to what we were saying about Jeff Lynne. Give it to the kid. Jeff Lynne, your musical. I mean, I suppose once you got to the level that you were and playing for England and became a very recognisable, and you were a household name. You're a music fan, as you say in the book that you it's been with you all your life. And I asked you in the build up to this if you'd give us. So I'll ask you now. Give me your all-time favourite 5 albums, if you can. You might not have done it, but have you done it?
I've thought about it, Chris, and I meant to have said to you that it's very, very difficult.
It is hard
because I've got.
But just roughly, I mean, give me 5 that you love.
It's like anything. I give it a bit of thought, and I was a huge fan of the Beatles.
Right.
And growing up, when for me the Beatles were at their best in the 60s, I like very much Hard Day's Night, Help, Rubber Soul, Revolver, Sgt. Pepper. Yeah. Those were great albums. I like very much the Simon and Garfunkel Bridge Over Troubled Water. That was a classic album. Yeah. But today, I tend to, play. My taste today is Don Henley, Jackson Brown, Boss Skaggs, Michael McDonald, Paul Carrick.
Some of these are friends.
Stephen Bishop.
Paul Carrick's a friend of yours. I mean, music fans would know that he sang on the Squeeze album, the 1982 album, probably. Tempted by the Fruit of Another, great song, great voice
then
as well.
Mike and the Mechanics, and then he's now by himself. But he also works with Eric Clapton. Whenever Eric's on the road, and Paul's just come back from Japan with Eric. He's been a friend since I went to Sheffield Wednesday back in 1990, and we've been very, very close friends. We holidayed together and still do, and we see each other on numerous occasions. I think he's so underrated. One of the great songwriters, but he's regarded in the music business as the man with a golden voice. I can't think of anyone, and I mentioned some great singers this now. I can't think of anyone who's got such a great voice as Paul.
I was thinking of him as a bit of a session man, and that's probably right. I mean, he was a kind of hired hand, wasn't he? What was the song? And I remember buying it when I was young. 12-inch single of the band was called Ace. Yeah. And the song was called
How Long?
How Long? How Long was a very well-known song. John, do you remember it?
Yeah, of course.
Well, he wrote that, and it was number one in America, so as they say, follow that. And then he went, joined Mike Rutherford and, Mike and Mechanics, and that fantastic song, In the Living Years. Then he did Over My Shoulder. Mm-hmm. I mean, you'd be surprised. I mean, he's done a couple of songs for the Eagles. He's very, very talented, and he's invited me down to his, I've been a couple of times to his home in Chorley Wood, and I may pop down at the end of this week, and he's spending a little time at the moment in his studio. And we're just good friends.
All right, so tell us, you must have met some great musicians and music people. I know. Tell us about your relationship with Jeff Lynne. I mean, the ELO, of course, and the Blues are still running out to Mr. Blue Sky. It needs changing now, by the way. But you know what I mean. It's you tell us.
I quite like it.
There was a song called Birmingham Blues, wasn't there? In one of their albums.
I like the running out to Mr. Blue Sky. I think that's part of the St Andrews experience.
Jeff and I have been good friends since. When I started at Birmingham back in 1970, he's lived now for many, many years in Los Angeles. I've been to visit him over at his home in Beverly Hills. And actually this time last year, I was in New York on holiday. It was a music holiday because exactly a year ago, last night and tonight, 2 consecutive nights, Jeff was in Madison Square Gardens, somewhere that I've always wanted to go. In what better place to see Jeff and ELO? I saw them twice, and then the following night I was up in Broadway to see Bruce Springsteen.
Sure. Now you're talking.
Now, I actually, had a private dinner with Bruce, and this is not me name dropping because I'm not that type, but I do.
It's a good name to drop, Trevor.
We don't mind.
How did it happen?
Good. I'm glad you asked. My friend Lucio has a very, very good Italian restaurant on the Fulham Road in Chelsea. For those who are interested, 257 Fulham Road. It doesn't need publicity because it's always full. But this particular day, Nick Skelton, who's a very close friend of mine, the show jumper, called me, and I'd already introduced him to Lucio's. He said, "Can you get us a table tonight for 5 at Lucio's?" I said, "It's going to be full, Nick. It's a bit late." I said, "It better be for somebody special for me calling Lucio." He said, "How about Bruce Springsteen?" I went, "What?" I said, "Can I come?" He said, "Yeah." So I got on the train. I rang Lucio. He said, I'll sort something. So we sat, Bruce and his wife Patty and Nick, myself, and we had a lovely, lovely evening. And it's the type of restaurant where he doesn't invite paparazzi. You can have a quiet night in there. You're not bothered.
This is fairly recent.
Might do now.
This is a few years ago, and I should say that Nick Skelton knew Bruce because Nick used to train Bruce's daughter.
She's a show jumper, isn't she?
Jessica Springsteen, and that's how the connection was. So Nick organised, for us to go. As I say, it'll be tomorrow a year in Broadway.
Wow. To
go and see Bruce Springsteen, and we were so fortunate. And then I called him up the next day, Nick, and said, thanks ever so much, for getting us, actually complimentary tickets. We had a box, to see Bruce Springsteen. He said, but did you go and see him afterwards? I said, listen, I'm not going to go and see him unless it was all set up. Mm-hmm. He said he was waiting for you afterwards.
Oh, no.
But that's me, Chris.
Did he know? Did Bruce Springsteen know who you were? Did he know about you? Is he aware of the English football scene? And that?
Nick would have told him.
Yeah.
I think Nick said, if I remember rightly, he used to go with his son to watch, football when teams used to do pre-season in the States.
Yeah.
So there was an interest, from Bruce, but he was waiting in his dressing room for me. But that,
you stood him up.
But Bruce. That's typical of me. I would never ever push myself unless it was absolutely perfectly sorted out.
When you had dinner with him, what was he like? What was he talking about? Was he talking about?
He wasn't talking about football. No, just in listen. I've been in this situation before where he is absolutely idolised. He's such an iconic figure, and friends of mine have been so envious of me, and it seems if you are as well, Chris.
I'm a big fan. Yeah, I mean, have you seen Blinded by the Light yet? The film. It's about an Asian boy sort of following his dreams and to Bruce Springsteen music. Long story, but it's a pretty good movie in some ways, but in others it's not. I know John's not a huge fan.
I saw him also.
I'm not such a fan
of Bruce, but
I saw him a few years ago as well, Chris.
You've cornered the market with this one. We're talking about Bruce Springsteen and Birmingham.
At the Etihad.
Oh, he's superb.
He did an open air thing then, and I went backstage before the gig, to have a little chat to him, and my friend's got a few photographs. He was so obliging. He really is the most down-to-earth guy, and I'm sure all his fans, if they don't already know that, of course, would be pleased to hear that.
Did the Broadway show? I remember you told me on the phone a few weeks ago that you thought it wasn't. It was a bit different. I mean, what did you? I mean, I've heard the album, and I think it's quite engaging. I mean, it's his life. I mean, I think he's a great storyteller, a fantastic storyteller. Even just in the spoken word. Did you find that or not?
Well, what I would say is that I always try and be as honest as I possibly can, and I hope that comes across in the book and in this interview. It was good, but I much prefer to see it in concert.
Yeah,
because I've seen hundreds of concerts, and you don't see many bad concerts. But
you do.
If you put me on the spot and said, who is the greatest you've seen in concert, I would have to say Bruce Springsteen.
Yeah.
I'm waiting, and I'd like to hear in the next month or so that he's going to do a tour next year. I mean,
I think the E Street Band are reforming.
It's a possibility.
Yeah. Who else? It's hundreds. Who else have you seen that you really like then live?
Well, in the early days, I'm glad we're talking about music, because I'm much sooner talk about music than football. Yeah. It's like, there are moments when you're a little bit down, a little bit sad, and it's like therapeutic.
Yeah.
I constantly, listen to music. I mentioned a few artists this now. Who have I?
You mentioned Boz Scaggs. That was
I've never met
I wasn't
Boz
expecting
Scaggs,
to hear you say that name.
I've met Paul McCartney, Mick Jagger, Elton John. Who else?
You've seen them or you met them?
Met them, yeah.
I met Jagger as well.
Most recently, I went to the Royal Albert Hall and saw, Mark Knopfler.
Yeah.
And I know Mark because he comes in Lucho's often.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are loads of guys that I know. And,
It's a great privilege, isn't it? I mean, what was it? You mentioned actually you met Jeff Lynne back in the 1970s. What was it like in those days? There was a bit of a Birmingham scene, wasn't there? There was Jeff Lynne, there was Roy Wood, there was The Move, there was Wizard, Black Sabbath, of course. It was quite a good time to be in that town, wasn't it?
I never got to know Steve Winwood, but Tony Iommi of Black Sabbath, I know very, very well. Tony's been a big friend. Actually, it was missing me not to mention him this now, because I see Tony often. Whereas Paul Carrick is a huge football fan, Sheffield Wednesday, and Jeff is a big Birmingham fan.
Good man.
Obviously, he doesn't go to the games now because he lives over in America. Tony has got no interest at all in football. He's been to 2 games.
I'm going to stop you there, Trevor. I went to the 140th Birmingham anniversary. I met you there, and I met some legends from the past. Ron Wiley, who was in a wheelchair, and I was very humbled to meet him and others. Tony Iommi was there, and we had a chat about. And you're right, he doesn't know anything about football, does he? But I mean, they were all Villa, weren't they? Black Sabbath.
The publishers of this book here in front of me, Pitch.
Yeah.
They very kindly allowed me to have, a hotel in Birmingham, and I could invite 40 of my closest friends, and the likes of Jasper Carrott, who has been a friend for years and years and years, came along. Bev Bevan, who was the drummer of ELO,
another blues fan.
And no, he's not blues.
Isn't he?
He's Wolves.
What?
Yeah, Jasper's Birmingham.
So is Robert Plant.
Jasper is.
Yeah.
Have you met Robert Plant?
And Tony Iommi came along, and everyone that was there, I gave them a book. And I actually said in my speech, I said, Tony, don't forget, I said, in 2 months' time, I'm coming over to your home, and I'm going to quiz you on this book. I want you to make sure you read it. And he had a little laugh about it, because I know that he will not read this book. But he is such a great kid. You cannot believe he is so gentle, so kind, that he's in a group like Black Sabbath.
Who you don't like, incidentally. I mean, say he's not interested in football. You're not a Sabbath fan, but there is that friendship.
When I say I don't like them, huge respect.
Yeah.
And the very, very last gig they did before they finished was at the NEC.
Yeah.
And I went along, I was invited by Tony, went along to see that, and it was good.
Yeah.
But it's not my taste of music.
I know what you mean.
And Tony knows that.
Yeah.
It's the same. I mean, I would say the same thing about Springsteen. I mean, you're obviously both massive fans.
Yeah.
I'm personally not really a Bruce Springsteen fan at all. I love his work ethic. I love his attitude. I love his incredible stage presence.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of his
You
voice.
haven't heard Darkness on the Edge
I
of
haven't
Town.
heard
If you
that,
haven't heard that, you haven't heard
Born
anything.
to Run, and I really disliked all that stuff he did in the 80s as well.
Did you? It's all about the Birmingham scene. Did you? I mean, it would have been around the time that probably just after you left, but all the sort of two-tone and the beats and all that kind of stuff. They're all Birmingham. Dave Wakeling and Ranking Roger, who died recently. Ranking Roger, the beat. And did any of that sort of filter through or not, or being local?
You could be talking
Dexys
in
Midnight
a
Runners?
foreign language at the moment. I really don't know anything. I've heard of Dexys Midnight Runners, but the other guys you mentioned, sorry, but I really don't
Coventry,
know.
wasn't it?
Scar,
Really
but the beat was.
What year did you say it was?
1980, 79, 80, 81.
Yeah, there was a period, of course, when, from 82 till 87, I was playing my football in Italy.
Yeah.
So
of course.
I lost a little bit of touch with what was going on then in the music scene back in the UK.
What was it like in terms of teammates? I mean, players like socialised together, and were there other teammates that were big music fans as well? Were there people
in Italy?
No, but just generally anywhere in your career. I mean, because the point of this podcast is to kind of talk to footballers about music, and it's fascinating to hear about that. I mean,
as you're asking me
was
the
it
question,
a big topic of conversation?
Well, I'm trying to think.
Think of one.
Yeah, no, I remember back in 79 stroke 80 when ELO had the spaceship, if you remember.
I went to one of those gigs. I was there as a kid.
There was they were going to appear at the NEC, and it was an unbelievably shocking day in terms of weather. The snow came down like you can't believe, and as a result of that, they actually played, but so many couldn't arrive at the gig, so they put another one on the following night when the weather was so much better. And I tell that story because I was playing at Nottingham Forest then, and I remember asking Jeff for about 15 tickets, I think it was, because all the squad at Nottingham Forest all came to the gig.
Oh, good stuff. Yeah. You mentioned the States, and you played for the Detroit Express.
Yeah.
Did you get out and have a look at the sort of Motown things, or is that not your thing? I mean, being the Motor City and all that. And
do you know that's one of my regrets, that I never got to actually see where Motown was, because being a great lover of music, I really should have done that.
It's quite a rough city, wasn't it? Or it still is, probably, isn't it?
Well, where we were, it was very pleasant, and we used to go to a couple of open air concerts, and that was an occasion in itself, because obviously the weather was lovely. You'd take an ice box, your little bottle of Chablis and a few bits of food in there, go early, sit up on the bank. And the two concerts that I remember going to was Donna Summer and the Doobie Brothers. And they were great occasions. They were. Yeah. I also, I talked earlier about I used to consider myself as a good professional, but on the one occasion where I really wasn't very professional was when I was playing for Detroit Express. We finished training on the Saturday morning, and we had a home game on the Sunday. And I went with a friend of mine, Graham Oates. We went down to Detroit Airport, got a flight an hour away to Cleveland, got picked up in a chauffeur-driven car, taken to the hotel, and there we were with Bev Bevan, Jeff Lynne, and the guys from ELO, because that night, that Saturday night, they were doing an open-air concert. Well, actually, it was like a little festival there, because I don't know if these names mean anything to you, but they certainly do to me. There was a group called Journey.
Yeah.
Then there was Foreigner.
Awful. We're not fans of this guy.
And then there was ELO.
Yeah, we'd take like ELO.
saw the concert. I actually sat, because there wasn't any seating arrangements.
If Ian Danter's listening to this, he'll be going, he loves Journey.
I was on the mixing machine, the music where they do the mixing.
Yeah, the mixing desk.
I sat there and watched ELO in front of 70,000. It's the biggest attendance they ever had. Wow. Afterwards, there was an after-gig party. Obviously, we took it easy because the following day, we got the flight back to Detroit. Jeff and Bev came with us on the plane, came to my home, and my late wife, Helen, did my pre-match meal, which was scrambled eggs and toast, and Jeff and Bev had exactly the same. They went along to the stadium to see me play, and of course the word got around that they were there, and half-time they were introduced and they went onto the pitch. And I spoke to Jeff about that recently, and I said to him, do you remember that? He said, vaguely I remember it, he said, you know.
Yeah, but Trevor, you didn't go and see Bruce in his changing room. That's the one.
But Detroit, I mean, that's probably a part of your career that football fans know the least about, but you played with some pretty big names over there, and you did really well, didn't you? I mean, you were
played against some big names, because the likes of George Best, Rodney Marsh, Johnny Giles, Alan Ball, they were all playing there at the time. I mean, in one charity game, I played against New York Cosmos and played against Carlos Alberto, Giorgio Chinaglia, Franz Beckenbauer. And so I really, really enjoyed my time in Detroit. I rarely travelled with the team. I used to go 2 days before with a press officer, because I would go in and do a press conference once again to try and publicise it.
That's what happens when you get a private jet, Trevor, and that's the way it goes. Let's move. Joking. Let's move on to, or maybe it was true. Let's move on to management then, because Sheffield Wednesday, Crystal Palace. I mean, obviously, I'm going to ask you about Birmingham because hopefully there's some Blues fans listening to this. And your book, I mean, I found it a fascinating read. I've got to be honest. I mean, I've had a bit of an up and down relationship with Karen Brady and myself on various things. What was she like? You struggled a bit, didn't you, with her?
Well, Karen was, the managing director, and she was incredibly loyal, to her bosses, especially David Sullivan. And we used to speak every day, but it was difficult because Karen openly admitted that she knew nothing about football. So when you're discussing football matters of great importance, in the back of your mind constantly was the fact that, you've got this girl who really doesn't understand anything about football. With regard to the finance, she was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. But that's what she was brought in for.
Yeah, but there were numerous occasions when it would have helped if I had somebody between myself and the owners who had great football background.
I'm sure West Ham fans might have different opinions maybe, but I think on the whole, I mean, Sullivan, Golds and Brady did well by Blue. I mean,
they did very well for Birmingham City too, didn't they? Whilst there were many things I could be critical, and I probably was critical, the one thing I said was that, I got enough opportunities to get the team into the Premier League. On 3 occasions we got to the playoffs, and I didn't quite achieve what I, had this ambition to do. But I wasn't critical of the owners. I said that I was given every opportunity.
Yeah, John, you can come in here because those 3 years that Trevor talks of, 99, 2000, 2001. Penalty shootout at Preston. I know, Trevor, it was I think I spoke to you that night, probably. I was there. I was at all of these games. But the first one was against Watford. Do you remember that?
The playoff.
99 playoff. The Watford got to the final. Did they go up in the end?
We
certainly
beat Bolton 2-0 in the final. Nicky Wright scored an overhead kick.
But I remember that semi-final, and I think the Watford game, we lost the first leg 1-0. Second leg, we scored in the second minute.
I remember saying to a mate of mine we were watching it together, and I said, we should be all right if we don't concede early.
Yeah,
and then you scored immediately. And then it ended up with Alex Chamberlain being a complete and utter hero in the penalty.
The atmosphere at St Andrews that night was sensational.
Could I just say that I was going to mention an incredible goalkeeping performance, possibly the best I've ever witnessed.
It's folklore at our place.
And I couldn't remember the guy's name.
Alex Chamberlain.
I remember it.
Okay, he was just outstanding. And then, you came to the last one, which is at Preston, which is the one that I remember more than any.
So do I. Had it been away goals, we'd have gone up. But
exactly, and the goal was offside.
The penalty shootout was at the building. It should have been at the building site end, and it was in the front of the Preston fans. You probably remember it, John. And it was on TV, and Trevor was lambasted in the media, and the Blues fans we were so fed up. You can imagine.
But you read what I said in the book about it. The fact that I wasn't going to.
It was badly
have a repeat of what happened a few months, only about 2 months prior to that. We played the League Cup final at the Millennium against Liverpool, and we went to extra time in penalties.
Yeah, I remember that game, yeah.
And I learned after the game that the referee spoke to the chief of police, and he was a Liverpool fan. So the penalties were taken at the Liverpool end. So when we went to Preston, I thought, well, I can't allow this to happen again. Yeah. As you mentioned, I spoke to the referee and the linesman prior to the game, and I said, listen, on the off chance that it goes to a penalty shootout, we're going to take them at that particular end. And he said, oh yeah, definitely. It goes. It goes to penalties, and the referee changed and went the other end.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know whether that was an influence from the television. I don't really know, but I was lambasted because I was being criticised. In fact, I was taking my players off the field, and I wasn't going to allow them to take the penalties. Listen, all I wanted was to talk to the referee away from the glare of the camera. That's all I wanted to do. Yeah. Listen, in my career, all I've ever asked for is fair play, and I wanted fair play. And that night, I'm sorry, but I'm not one for criticising referees. That night, I got let down badly. I got put up in front of the FA, and I had to pay a fine.
It was an unfortunate end of the season. Yeah. I mean, and you left the following season. You just mentioned
halfway through the season.
Yeah, that's right. And the Blues got promoted that following season. But that you mentioned that League Cup final just briefly, and you talked about the referee and David Ellery. I interviewed him on my programme on Sky just after that, and you remember the penalty incident that should have been given by a foul on Andrew Johnson by was it Henshaw? Yeah. Definite penalty. VAR, hello VAR, Stockley Park, are you watching? Definite penalty. We would have beaten Liverpool as a second division club. That was in extra time, wasn't it? Yeah. Real shame that, and that would have been a trophy for you.
What did he say about it, Ellery?
He said, "I didn't see it as a penalty." Well, guess what? We did. I mean, it was a penalty.
Are you a fan of VAR, Trevor, now? Because you talk about fair play in football. I mean, it's a huge topic at the moment. Are you in favour?
Not totally, no. No, I think that what it's doing is taking a little bit of the spirit out of the game. There's parts of VAR that I support, I quite like, but there's other parts I do not like. I mean, the present situation now with regard to handball in the penalty box, I mean, that is just disgusting. If you go back to the '66 World Cup, with Jeff Hurst, was it over the line or not? I think for that, VAR is terrific. It enhances everything.
I'm glad it wasn't around in those days, Trevor.
The sport.
Just give the ref.
There's too many, decisions now that we should allow the referee to do it.
Give the ref a little monitor on the side, word in the ear from the fourth official, like it used to be. Have a quick wander over if you think it's contentious, and have done with it. And that would be Listen, we've been ages already, and Trevor, I think you said you've got things that have kept you for ages, and it's been brilliant. And it's fascinating to hear you talking about the other sides of you as well, which is great.
So can I go home now and play some music?
You got to play some music.
To recover from this.
We're not allowing you boss gags. We're not allowing you Journey either.
Do you know what I've got? I've got Spotify.
Oh yeah.
And I've got mostly the ones I mentioned to you this now. Michael McDonald and Don Henley and Glenn Fry and Paul Carrick, all these kind of guys. Yeah.
I'll tell you what my favourite. I'll tell you what I think is. You should listen to it. Hotel California, obviously the famous Eagles album.
Yeah.
I was always more of a Glenn Fry fan than a Don Henley fan.
Yeah.
But everyone talks about the title track.
Yeah.
The last track, The Last Resort, 7 minutes long. It's like it's a piano thing, Glenn Fry song. Absolutely wonderful. I think it lives too much in the shadow.
Not like John's into sort of garage rock and stuff like that. Iggy and the Stooges and stuff like that, which is fantastic. But listen, we could talk all night. I've just got we've got these fluttering around with these programs. Another picture of you, Trevor, just to end with. You remember that? It's at England. Trevor Francis of England, the England youth trial match from you when you were very young there, 1970. Remember that? The Little World Cup and stuff like that. Picture of Trevor.
I remember
winning a heading duel with his white top and blue shorts on.
The Little World Cup we actually won twice in consecutive years with Gordon Milne as manager on one occasion, and Bill Shorthouse, who was the reserve team manager at Birmingham City, was manager of the England youths. Yeah, they were good days.
And you're no longer the youngest person to play for Birmingham City, because, as you know, and I think you've met him, Jude Bellingham.
I did meet him.
Jude Bellingham.
But it was
a new name for you, John, but he's going to be a player. 16 years.
Is he the new Trevor Francis?
He's very good, younger than you. And you talked about that physical maturity and stuff. I mean, there's a picture of you, I think he put it on his Instagram or something, of him 4 years ago, about 2'9", standing next to you. And he's shot up since. And he walked past me at the Portsmouth game, and I thought,
what is he, about 6 foot?
He's about that. He looks like a racehorse now. He's very young. He played very well in that game. But sort of advice from you, Trev. I mean, for someone like that, that first season you were in and out of that team when you had some injuries as well, and then all of a sudden you sort of played your first game end of September. And then you had some injuries and in and outs, and then you just went mad in the new year and scored all those goals. 15 in 15 games.
The only advice I would give is what I was talking about a little bit earlier in this interview, that I think it's very, very important that, to enjoy the moments, but to be as level-headed as possible, to work hard at the training ground. When you come away from the training ground, conduct yourself in the right manner, be very, very professional. There's going to be a lot of temptations, for one who's so young. But if he is serious about becoming, a professional footballer, the one thing that's never mentioned with myself is that I actually played. We talk about I was 16 years of age, but I didn't finish playing until I was 39. It's a long, long career, 23 years. Not too many have had that. So I consider myself very, very fortunate. And if this young boy wants to make it to the top, he's got to be so dedicated. Because otherwise he will not reach the top.
Well, it's been lovely, Trevor, and I'm holding this book, 1 in a Million. You were certainly the first £1 million player, and wish you well. What just finally, what are your plans now? You bit more TV work, that sort of stuff?
Well, I'm going to do some work for IMG on the Italian Serie A matches. I've still got a great interest in Italian football. Yeah. It's nowhere near as good as it was back in the 80s when I was there, playing against the likes of Platini.
I was going to ask you played against Maradona, didn't you?
Zico, Maradona, I mean, these were...
What was that like, just briefly?
They were useful players, those guys.
And here's a question for you, just to round it off. For me, you were the best British player I saw. I think I did see George Best, and you played against George Best, didn't you, a couple of times? And I remember I saw Bestie a couple of times. One was in the late 60s.
Played in his testimonial in Belfast.
Best player for you? I mean, just all-time best player. We get the Messi-Ronaldo argument now. Yeah. Which of the two for you?
I find that incredibly difficult. What I would say is that I'm so privileged, and we all should be, that we've been watching two phenomenons, because what they've done the last 10 years is just exceptional. And they will go down, if not the best, certainly up there in the top 3 or 4. I mean, when I was playing, it was always said that there'll never, ever be anyone like Pelé. Yeah. I saw Maradona at close quarters. I played against him on a few occasions. we actually swapped shirts after a Napoli-Atalanta game, and that's, something that I'm absolutely thrilled about. He was exceptional. And I'm trying to compare him to Pelé. I'm now trying to compare Maradona to Messi and Ronaldo. It's just so difficult.
Yes.
What I would say is that those 4 players are the best there's ever been.
Really, those 4, yeah. And Trevor Francis, number 5.
And I've omitted Johan Cruyff from that.
And Luther Blissett.
No, listen, wonderful memories. I mean, it's been a real pleasure, Trevor.
Thank you.
I will never forget when that 70-71 season. That's why I've got these programs here, and in the promotion season that followed, and wonderful memories. And long may they continue.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
We'll
pleasure.
Wish you well for the future.
You've been listening to the Rock and Gold podcast, presented by Chris Skudder and John Anderson, engineered by Tony Harris, available on Audio Boom, Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Deezer and iHeartRadio. If you've enjoyed being with us, don't forget to review, rate and subscribe. You can also follow us on Twitter at rock_gold and Facebook. Music and football. What else is there?